The silver shuttle danced through Virilia Prime's atmosphere, leaving a trail of blue-tinged vapor in its wake. The planet's surface spread beneath the vessel like a living tapestry. Buildings that weren't quite buildings, but rather grown structures of interwoven bioluminescent materials that pulsed with their own internal rhythm. Commander Rafe Halden watched through the viewport as the sprawling royal palace came into view, its spiraling towers and undulating archways defying Earth's rigid architectural sensibilities. "Rafe, your heartbeat is elevated," chirped Trudy, the softball-sized AI sphere hovering near his right shoulder. Pre-diplomatic mission anxiety, or just marveling at the view? Neither. Rafe adjusted his ceremonial armor's collar for the 5th time, just trying to figure out how these Virilians manage to grow buildings that look like they're about to swallow you whole. I mean, seriously, that thing has teeth, right? Trudy's metallic surface rippled with blue light patterns, her version of an eye roll. Those are ornamental biocrystalline formations. According to my data on Varlian aesthetics, they represent the 14 celestial guardians of... Save the cultural dissertation for someone who hasn't been stuck in a shuttle for 16 hours. Rafe cut in, stretching his arms above his head until something popped satisfyingly in his spine. "Just remind me one more time why Earth Command thought sending me. The guy who once accidentally called the Arcturian ambassador buddy was a good idea for this mission. Your diplomatic track record is surprisingly effective despite your unconventional approach," Trudy observed. "The official brief cited your authentic human candidness as an asset when dealing with the notoriously reserved Virilians." Rafe snorted. Diplomatic speak for, he doesn't know when to shut up. "Got it." The shuttle touched down with barely a tremor on a landing pad that seemed to be made of some sort of softly glowing moss. As the exit ramp descended, Rafe squared his shoulders inside his ceremonial armor, an impressive array of gleaming plates emblazoned with Earth Alliance insignia and various mission badges. The armor was mostly ceremonial, but still contained various shielding capabilities and basic life support functions. Varelian atmospheric composition is well within human tolerance parameters, Trudy announced. Oxygen levels at 23%, trace noble gases slightly elevated. Temperature at 22 degrees Celsius. So I won't die or grow a third eye. Always a promising start to a diplomatic mission, Rafe muttered before plastering on his official representative smile and striding down the ramp. 2 Varelian guards stood at attention at the base of the ramp. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with skin that seemed to shimmer between pale blue and green, depending on how the light hit it. Their features were almost human, but with enlarged eyes that were entirely silver, without visible pupils, and small gill-like structures along their elongated necks. Their ceremonial armor appeared to be growing directly from their bodies, a seamless integration of biology and technology that Earth scientists still couldn't quite comprehend. "Greetings, Earth Ambassador," intoned the guard on the left, their voice melodic but with an underlying vibration that made Rafe's molars tingle. "We welcome you to Virilia Prime." "Thanks for having me," Rafe replied with a small bow, just deep enough to show respect, but not deep enough to suggest submission per the diplomatic briefing. "Love what you've done with the place. The whole living building aesthetic really works. Makes our concrete boxes back home look positively primitive." The guards exchanged a quick glance that Rafe couldn't interpret before the one on the right said, "The Royal Palace appreciates your observation. Please follow us to the Grand Hall. Her Royal Highness Princess Alessa awaits your arrival." As they led him through corridors that seemed to breathe, the walls literally expanding and contracting in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, Rafe couldn't help but marvel at the alien beauty surrounding him. Light emanated not from fixtures, but from the structure itself, shifting colors flowing through what appeared to be vein-like channels in the walls. Occasionally, small floating orbs of light would detach themselves from the ceiling and drift lazily through the air before reintegrating with another section of the palace. "Now that's something you don't see in standard human architecture," Rafe commented to Trudy, who was scanning everything with obvious technological curiosity. "The palace is a semi-sentient biological construct," Trudy explained quietly. It responds to the emotional states and needs of its inhabitants. These light patterns indicate a state of curiosity, I believe. The palace is literally interested in you, Rafe. Great, Rafe muttered. Even the building is giving me the once-over. No pressure. They eventually reached an enormous chamber where the biological architecture reached its zenith of complexity. The ceiling soared at least 50 feet above them, with crystalline structures hanging like frozen waterfalls. The floor beneath them was a living mosaic that seemed to ripple under their feet, creating patterns that flowed outward from each footstep. Around the perimeter of the room stood Varelian courtiers in various elaborate biological adornments, their silver eyes watching Rafe with undisguised curiosity. At the far end of the hall, upon a dais that appeared to be composed of interwoven strands of luminescent material, sat Princess Alessa of Varelia Prime. Even by Varelian standards, she was striking. Her skin had a deeper blue undertone than the others, marking her royal bloodline. Where other Varelians wore their biological armor as discrete plates, hers formed an intricate latticework across her tall, lithe form, with points of light pulsing through it like stars. Her silver eyes seemed larger, more penetrating than those of her subjects, and the crown upon her head wasn't a separate object, but rather a growth of crystalline material emerging directly from her skull. Rafe had been briefed extensively about Princess Alessa. Notoriously cold in diplomatic settings, she was known throughout the galaxy for her analytical mind and unwavering dedication to her people's advancement. The briefing mentioned that no one had ever seen her smile in public, a fact that Rafe immediately filed away as a personal challenge. He approached the dais and executed the formal bow that had been drilled into him by Earth's diplomatic corps. Your Royal Highness, he began with uncharacteristic formality. I bring greetings from Earth and the Alliance of Soul. We are honored by your willingness to discuss potential collaboration between our peoples. Alessa regarded him silently for a long moment, her head tilting slightly to one side in a movement that reminded Rafe of a bird of prey considering its next meal. Commander Halden, she finally said, her voice carrying that same musical vibration as the guards, but with an added layer of harmonic complexity that Rafe found oddly captivating. Your reputation precedes you. Rafe's eyebrows shot up. All good things, I hope? Though knowing some of my previous missions, I'd settle for mostly non-catastrophic. A ripple of something, shock, disapproval, passed through the assembled courtiers. Apparently, humor wasn't on the diplomatic protocol for today. Alessa's expression remained unchanged. Your candor is noted. She stood in one fluid motion and descended from the dais until she stood directly before Rafe, studying him with those unsettling silver eyes. She was nearly as tall as he was, which meant she stood head and shoulders above most humans. I understand Earth considers armor to be a symbol of strength and authority, she said, her gaze traveling over his ceremonial plating. On Varelia, it serves a different purpose. Oh, Rafe prompted when she didn't continue. And what purpose is that? Protection, yes, but also concealment, she replied. We believe one cannot truly know another while barriers remain between them. She paused, then said words that sent a shock wave through the assembled court. Take off your armor, Commander Halden. The hall fell silent. Even the pulsing lights in the walls seemed to freeze momentarily. Rafe blinked, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, Your Highness, but did you just ask me to strip in front of your entire court? Because where I come from, that's usually at least a third-date activity. Trudy emitted a small beep that Rafe recognized as her equivalent of a groan. If Alessa was offended by his attempt at humor, she didn't show it. Your protection is unnecessary here. If we are to establish trust between our peoples, we must begin without barriers. Rafe glanced around at the silent, watching courtiers, then back at the princess. This definitely hadn't been covered in the briefing. Was this some kind of test? A cultural ritual he hadn't been warned about? Your Highness, he began carefully, I'm all for trust-building exercises, but my diplomatic training didn't exactly cover impromptu armor removal. Is this standard protocol for visiting dignitaries? It is not, she admitted, which only confused Rafe further. But you are not a standard dignitary, are you, Commander? There was something in the way she said it, not quite accusatory, but knowing, that set off warning bells in Rafe's mind. Still, he'd been sent here to establish diplomatic relations, and if that meant playing along with unexpected royal requests, well, when in Rome, or Virilia, I guess, he muttered, reaching for the release mechanisms on his ceremonial armor. The plates detached with soft clicks, and Rafe carefully removed them piece by piece, handing each to a startled-looking Varelian attendant who quickly stepped forward. Underneath, he wore the standard-issue bodysuit, a form-fitting black material designed to regulate temperature and collect biometric data. After removing the last piece of armor, he stood before the princess, feeling oddly vulnerable despite being fully clothed. "Happy now?" he asked, spreading his arms slightly. "I feel like I should warn you, without the impressive shoulder pads, I'm about 30% less intimidating." For the first time, something flickered in Alessa's silver eyes, a hint of curiosity, amusement. It was gone too quickly for Rafe to be sure. "Intriguing," she said softly, before addressing him in a more formal tone. "You will join me for a private audience, Commander. There are matters of great importance we must discuss that are not for all ears." Her gaze shifted briefly to certain members of her court in a way that Rafe didn't miss. As the princess turned and began walking toward a side entrance, Rafe couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just passed some kind of test, or perhaps walked willingly into a trap. Either way, his diplomatic mission had just taken a sharp turn from the expected script. "Trudy," he whispered to the AI, sphere hovering beside him. "Make a note. Next time Earth Command sends me on a diplomatic mission, pack less armor and more portable jokes." "Noted," Trudy replied dryly. "Though I calculate a 73% probability that this particular scenario was impossible to prepare for, regardless of your wardrobe choices." As Rafe followed Princess Alessa out of the Grand Hall, acutely aware of his missing armor and the court's stares boring into his back, he couldn't help but wonder what exactly he'd gotten himself into. The princess's request had been unusual, yes, but something told him it was merely the first of many surprises awaiting him on Virilia Prime. "Take off your armor," she had said, and he complied. But Rafe had the distinct impression that on this strange, living world, there were many more layers left to shed before the truth would be revealed. The corridor Alessa led him through seemed to shift and reconfigure itself as they walked, the biological architecture responding to her presence. Doorways appeared in walls that had seemed solid moments before, and passages curved in directions that Rafe's earth-trained sense of spatial awareness found disorienting. "Your palace has a mind of its own," Rafe commented, watching as tendrils of bioluminescence followed Alessa's movement like loyal pets. "Back home, we just use floor plans and hallways that stay put. The royal house of Virilia exists in symbiosis with its dwelling," Alessa replied without turning. "It adapts to our needs and protects us from those who mean harm. So it's part building, part bodyguard?" Rafe asked, ducking instinctively as a crystalline formation descended from the ceiling before realizing it was reshaping itself to allow more headroom for his human height. "Thanks," he muttered to the ceiling, feeling only slightly ridiculous for addressing architecture. "In a manner of speaking," Alessa said, and Rafe could have sworn he detected a hint of amusement in her tone. "Though I would not recommend attempting to explain Varelian biosymbiotic relationships using human architectural concepts. The translation would be imprecise. Story of my diplomatic career," Rafe sighed. "Always something lost in translation." Trudy hovered closer to Rafe's ear. "The biosignals in this corridor are off the charts," the AI whispered. "This section of the palace appears to be directly connected to the princess's own biological rhythms. Her heart rate, respiration, even brain activity seems to have corresponding patterns in the surrounding structure. So we're literally walking through her mood ring?" Rafe whispered back. "Great. Let's hope she doesn't get irritated." As if on cue, a door manifested before them, not sliding open or swinging on hinges, but rather unfurling like the petals of a flower. The chamber beyond was smaller than the Grand Hall, but no less impressive. The walls curved organically to form a perfect dome, with a central area that appeared to be a meeting space. Instead of chairs, there were sculpted formations that Rafe assumed served as seating. Standing near one of these formations was a tall, Varelian female. Unlike the princess, her biological armor was more utilitarian in design, with fewer decorative elements, but a distinctly military bearing. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly at Rafe's armorless appearance. Lady Serena. Alessa acknowledged the Varelian with a slight inclination of her head. This is Commander Rafe Halden of Earth. Your Highness, Serena responded with a formal bow before turning her attention to Rafe. Commander, I see you've already acclimated to our customs. Nothing says diplomatic flexibility like impromptu dress code changes. Rafe replied with a smile that wasn't returned. Tough crowd. Lady Serena is my chief security advisor and confidant, Alessa explained. She will be present for our discussions, as will your companion. Her silver gaze flicked to Trudy. Trudy's my AI assistant, Rafe explained. Think of her as my external brain, smarter, more polite, and significantly better at math. I'm also programmed to prevent Commander Halden from committing severe diplomatic faux pas, Trudy added, though my success rate in this function is admittedly suboptimal. That actually earned a reaction from Serena, a slight raising of what might have been eyebrows on a human face. Fascinating, a self-aware computational entity that acknowledges its own limitations. We all have our crosses to bear, Rafe quipped. Hers is being stuck with me. Alessa gestured toward the organic seating. Please, Commander. We have much to discuss. Rafe cautiously lowered himself onto one of the formations, surprised to find it reconfiguring itself beneath him to accommodate human anatomy. Whoa! He exclaimed as the living furniture adjusted perfectly to support his spine. Now that's customer service. Earth furniture designers could learn a thing or two. The palace responds to biological feedback, Alessa explained, taking her own seat across from him. It seeks to optimize comfort for all recognized life forms. Recognize being the key word, I'm guessing, Rafe said. What happens if something unrecognized walks in? Does it get the medieval torture rack configuration? Serena's expression darkened. Unrecognized entities are not permitted within the royal house. Hence the extensive scanning we underwent during your arrival, Trudy chimed in. I detected no fewer than 17 distinct biosensing mechanisms analyzing our genetic and physiological signatures between the landing pad and the Grand Hall. Oh, Rafe blinked. And here I thought those were just fancy light fixtures. Alessa leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes fixed on Rafe with an intensity that made him instinctively want to shift backward. Commander Halden, are you familiar with the Genetic Concordance Project? The abrupt change of subject caught Rafe off guard. Can't say that I am, Your Highness. Sounds like either a revolutionary scientific breakthrough or an indie band from Seattle. It is the primary reason we have invited Earth representation to Varelia, Alessa continued, ignoring his attempt at humor. For centuries, Varelians have studied the genetic compatibility of various species across the galaxy. We believe that understanding the fundamental building blocks of different life forms is key to peaceful coexistence. Noble goal, Rafe nodded, though I'm getting a distinct but vibe here. But, Alessa confirmed, we have encountered resistance to our research in certain quadrants. Not everyone shares our vision of a genetically harmonious galaxy. Some species find the concept of genetic study threatening, Serena added. They fear what they do not understand. To be fair, Rafe pointed out, throughout human history, we just want to study your genes hasn't always been followed by tea parties and friendship bracelets. Usually more along the lines of surprise, you're now test subject number 9. A flicker of something, annoyance, respect, crossed Alessa's face. We are not interested in experimentation, Commander. Merely understanding. Understanding for what purpose? Rafe pressed, his diplomatic veneer momentarily giving way to genuine concern. Because I've got to tell you, if I've been sent here as some kind of high-grade DNA sample, Earth Command is going to be pretty ticked off. Not to mention me. Your genetic material is of interest, yes, Alessa admitted with characteristic Varelian bluntness. But we seek your willing participation and knowledge. The humans and Varelians have much to offer one another. Rafe exchanged a glance with Trudy, whose surface displayed a pattern that he recognized as her proceeding with caution mode. Your Highness, Rafe said carefully, I'm all for interspecies cooperation. Earth has benefited tremendously from our alliances across the galaxy. But I need to understand exactly what kind of participation we're talking about here. A fair request, Alessa conceded. The Royal Science Division would value tissue samples, certainly, but more importantly, we seek your insights on human genetic adaptation. Your species has survived numerous catastrophic events that would have eradicated less adaptable life forms. This resilience is remarkable. We're like cockroaches that way, Rafe agreed. Just can't seem to keep us down. Indeed, Alessa said, and Rafe could have sworn the corner of her mouth twitched slightly upward. But beyond physical samples, we hope to establish a genuine exchange of knowledge. Varelian biosynthetic technology for human adaptational strategies. It sounded reasonable enough, but years in diplomatic service had taught Rafe to listen not just to what was being said, but what wasn't, and there was definitely something Alessa wasn't telling him. Well, knowledge exchange is always on the table, he said cheerfully. Though I should warn you, most of my personal adaptation strategies involve inappropriate humor and creative interpretation of regulations. Which explains much about your diplomatic record, Serena observed dryly. Before Rafe could respond, a pulsation ran through the chamber walls, different from the gentle rhythms he'd observed since arriving. This was sharper, more urgent. Alessa and Serena exchanged glances, and the princess rose immediately to her feet. You must excuse me, Commander. An urgent matter requires my attention. Lady Serena will show you to your quarters and answer any additional questions you may have. Without waiting for a response, Alessa moved swiftly toward the unfurling doorway, which sealed itself behind her with a soft, organic whoosh. Well, that was abrupt, Rafe commented, turning to Serena. Royal emergency or convenient exit strategy? The princess does not offer explanations where none are required, Serena replied coldly. Kulme, your accommodation has been prepared in the East Wing. As they exited through a different doorway, Rafe whispered to Trudy, run a scan on those wall pulsations. I want to know if that was a real alert or if Her Royal Highness just got tired of my charming personality. Already analyzing, Trudy confirmed quietly. There was indeed an information surge through the biological neural network, but I cannot determine its content or authenticity. The corridors they traversed now were less ornate than those connected to the royal chambers, though still alive with the same bioluminescent veining. Occasionally, they passed Varelian servants or guards, all of whom regarded Rafe's armorless state with obvious curiosity. So, Lady Serena, Rafe attempted conversation as they walked. How long have you been the princess's right-hand woman? Or should I say right-hand Varelian? Terminology gets tricky in interspecies diplomacy. I have served the royal house for 27 orbital cycles, Serena replied stiffly. Impressive, Rafe nodded. And in all that time, has the princess ever asked another diplomat to take off their armor on the first meeting? Serena's stride faltered almost imperceptibly. The princess's methods are her own. That's not a no, Rafe observed. Serena stopped abruptly before what appeared to be another organic doorway. These are your quarters. They have been calibrated for human physiology. Your scheduling interface is the illuminated panel beside the resting platform. Thanks for the tour, Rafe said. Any chance you could point me toward the Palace Data Archives? I'd love to learn more about Varelian culture while I'm here. Access to Palace Archives is restricted, Serena replied immediately, even for an invited diplomatic guest. Rafe raised his eyebrows. Seems a bit counterproductive to the whole knowledge exchange thing. Serena's silver eyes narrowed slightly. Limited access can be arranged. Tomorrow. For now, you should rest. The princess will summon you when she wishes to continue discussions. With that, the Varelian turned and strode away, leaving Rafe contemplating the organic doorway. Well, She's a barrel of laughs, he muttered to Trudy. Think it's something I said, or just the general Varelian aversion to humor? Cultural differences aside, I detected elevated stress markers in Lady Serena's vocal patterns, Trudy observed. She appeared unsettled by your presence. Story of my life. Rafe sighed, approaching the door, which unfurled at his proximity. Let's check out our digs, shall we? The chamber beyond was spacious and surprisingly Earth-like in its appointments, though still constructed from the same living materials as the rest of the palace. A large platform that presumably served as a bed dominated one side of the room, while a seating area occupied the other. The illumination came from concentrated points of bioluminescence in the ceiling that approximated standard lighting rather than the diffuse glow of the corridors. Homie, Rafe commented, moving further into the room. At least they didn't expect me to sleep in a pod of alien goo or something. The accommodation appears designed based on detailed knowledge of human comfort preferences, Trudy noted, hovering toward what looked like an information terminal embedded in one wall. This suggests significant prior research into human physiology and habits. Which brings us back to the whole, why are we really here question, Rafe said, lowering himself onto the edge of the bed platform, which adjusted beneath him just as the seating in the meeting chamber had. The genetic research angle seems legitimate enough, but there's something the Ice Princess isn't telling us. Agreed. Trudy's surface rippled with patterns of analytical processing, permission to interface with the room's systems. I may be able to access non-classified information channels. Go for it, Rafe nodded. Just try not to trigger any alarms. I'd hate to find out what a Varelian detention cell looks like. As Trudy floated toward the information terminal, Rafe leaned back on the bed and closed his eyes, mentally reviewing the strange events of the day. The princess's request to remove his armor still puzzled him. Was it simply a Varelian custom he hadn't been briefed on, or something more significant? Rafe, Trudy's voice interrupted his thoughts. I've discovered something concerning. Rafe sat up immediately. What is it? I've established limited access to the palace's information network, as Lady Serena suggested would be possible. However, I detected an anomaly, a shadow access point that appears to have been used to retrieve specific information about you approximately 16 standard hours ago. Before we even arrived, Rafe frowned. What kind of information? Your genetic profile, Trudy replied, her voice modulated lower than usual. The complete sequence was accessed from Earth Alliance Central Records, not just your public diplomatic file. Rafe stood, suddenly feeling exposed in ways that had nothing to do with his missing armor. That would require high-level access codes. Are we talking about an authorized exchange or a hack? Unknown, Trudy admitted. The access signature is encrypted using methods I'm unfamiliar with. But there's more. The data was routed to a subsection of the palace that doesn't appear on any official schematics. A secret lab? Rafe suggested, pacing the room now. Would explain the princess's interest in my DNA. Possibly. Trudy's surface flickered with calculation patterns. But if the Varelian government wanted your genetic information, they could have requested it through official channels. Earth and Varelia have existing scientific exchange protocols, which means either the princess is going behind Earth's back, Rafe reasoned, or someone in the palace is going behind hers. The latter scenario would align with her abrupt departure from our meeting, Trudy pointed out, if she received notification of unauthorized activity. Rafe nodded slowly. We need to find that off-the-books location. Can you trace the data path? I can attempt to follow the routing signatures, Trudy confirmed. But navigating this palace without authorization would be challenging, even with my mapping capabilities. The structure literally reconfigures itself. Then we'll need to be creative, Rafe said, a familiar gleam of determination in his eyes. And possibly reckless. My specialty. Trudy's surface displayed her equivalent of a sigh. Shall I update your diplomatic incident counter preemptively? Let's give a few hours, Rafe winked. I haven't even had dinner yet. As if responding to his words, a section of the wall reconfigured itself to reveal what appeared to be a food preparation area, complete with containers that presumably held Varelian cuisine adapted for human consumption. Perfect timing, Rafe observed. Let's fuel up while you work on tracking that signal. Something tells me we're going to have a busy night ahead. Do try to remember you're a diplomatic representative, not a covert operative, Trudy reminded him primly. Why not both? Rafe grinned, approaching the food containers with cautious curiosity. Earth sent me because I think outside the box. And right now, that box is looking increasingly suspicious. As darkness fell over Virilia Prime, casting the palace's bioluminescent features into sharper relief against the night, Rafe Halden prepared to uncover whatever secrets lay beneath the shimmering surface of this alien world. Armed with nothing but his wits, his AI companion, and his distinctly undiplomatic curiosity. Hours later, with the Varlian night at its darkest point, Rafe stood in his quarters, studying a holographic representation of the palace that Trudy had compiled from their limited access to the information systems. The signal terminated somewhere in this section. Trudy indicated a blurred area in the lower levels of the palace. I cannot get more precise coordinates due to interference in the biological neural network. Deliberate interference? Rafe asked, peering closely at the indistinct region. Almost certainly, Trudy confirmed. The palace's internal communication system has been compartmentalized in that area. Data flows in, but not out. Rafe rubbed his chin thoughtfully, like an information quarantine. So how do we get there without triggering every alarm in this living building? That's the interesting part. Trudy's surface rippled with what Rafe recognized as her version of excitement. I've identified maintenance channels in the palace's biological structure, essentially the equivalent of a circulatory system. Maintenance drones use these channels to repair and regulate the living architecture. And you think I can what? Swim through the palace's veins? Rafe asked skeptically. Not quite so dramatic, Trudy replied. But I've located access points where repair personnel can enter the channels. With my guidance, you can navigate to the restricted area without using the main corridors. Rafe considered this, weighing the diplomatic ramifications against his growing concern about what might be happening in those hidden sections of the palace. If someone was using his genetic information without authorization, possibly without even the princess's knowledge, he needed to know why. All right, he decided, but I'll need something better than this bodysuit if we're crawling through alien maintenance tunnels. Any ideas? The room contains basic supplies, Trudy noted, indicating a section of wall that hadn't yet revealed its contents to Rafe. Given Varelian attention to human needs, there may be appropriate attire. Sure enough, when Rafe approached the wall section, it reconfigured to reveal a storage area containing various items of clothing. Among them was what appeared to be a utility jumpsuit made of a flexible, resilient material not unlike the service uniforms he'd seen on Varlian workers around the palace. Perfect, he murmured, quickly changing into the jumpsuit. It fits surprisingly well, another indication of the Varelians' detailed knowledge of human physiology. How do I look? Ready for some unauthorized exploration? The likelihood of being mistaken for authorized maintenance personnel is approximately 27%, Trudy calculated. However, at this hour, personnel movement is minimal, reducing your chances of encounter. I'll take those odds, Rafe said, securing the jumpsuit's fastenings. Now, where's our entry point to these maintenance tunnels? The nearest access point is 2 corridors east of our current position, Trudy replied. I have identified a temporary gap in the security monitoring pattern that will allow us approximately 40 seconds to reach it undetected. Rafe took a deep breath. Well then, timing is everything. Let's go. The corridor outside his quarters was dimly lit, the bioluminescence reduced to a soft glow that mimicked nighttime. Rafe moved swiftly but quietly, with Trudy hovering close beside him, her own illumination dimmed to avoid attention. They reached the access point, a panel in the wall that appeared no different from any other section of the living architecture until Trudy emitted a specific frequency that caused it to ripple and reveal a narrow opening. Maintenance channels accessed, Trudy announced quietly. Please proceed quickly. The opening will reseal in 15 seconds. Rafe squeezed through the opening, finding himself in a much narrower passage. Unlike the grand corridors of the palace, This space was utilitarian, with pulsing tubes of various sizes running along the walls and ceiling. The illumination here was a steady blue-green, casting everything in an underwater-like glow. Follow the central conduit, Trudy instructed, floating ahead to guide him. These channels run throughout the entire palace structure, carrying nutrients, repair nanites, and communication signals. As they progressed deeper into the maintenance network, Rafe couldn't help but marvel at the complexity of the living palace. What had appeared beautiful but alien from the public areas now revealed itself as an incredible feat of biological engineering. A structure as intricate and functional as any spacecraft he'd served on, but entirely organic. The restricted area should be approximately 300 meters ahead. Trudy informed him after they'd been traveling for nearly 20 minutes through increasingly complex junctions of biological conduits. Energy signatures suggest significant activity despite the late hour. Someone's burning the midnight oil, Rafe muttered, or whatever the Varlian equivalent is. They reached a point where the maintenance channel widened into a junction, with multiple paths branching outward. One of these pathways emitted a distinctly different kind of light, harsher, more artificial than the soft bioluminescence that permeated the rest of the palace. "That's our target," Rafe whispered, pointing to the anomalous light source. "How do we get in without announcing ourselves?" "There appears to be an observation port approximately 10 meters along that channel," Trudy replied after a quick scan. It would allow visual access without requiring entry to the space itself. They made their way carefully toward the observation port, which turned out to be a transparent section in the otherwise opaque wall of the maintenance tunnel. Through it, Rafe could see into a laboratory space unlike anything else he'd encountered in the palace. Where the rest of the Varelian royal residence embraced organic fluidity, this chamber was starkly geometric. Equipment of both Varelian and non-Varelian design filled the space, much of it connected to large transparent tanks filled with swirling liquids of various colors. Displays flickered with data streams and genetic sequences that even Rafe, with his limited scientific knowledge, could recognize as DNA mapping. "What in the seven systems?" he whispered, pressing closer to the observation port. 3 Varelians moved about the laboratory, their biological armor styled differently than those he'd seen in the royal court. More utilitarian, with additional technical interfaces embedded directly into their skin. "These are not royal staff," Trudy observed quietly. "Their biological signatures don't match any personnel registered in the palace database that I accessed." "Intruders?" Rafe suggested. "Unknown, but they appear to have full access to these facilities." One of the Varelians approached a central console and input a series of commands. In response, one of the largest tanks began to bubble more vigorously, its contents shifting from blue to a vibrant purple. "Trudy, can you tell what they're doing?" Rafe asked, his eyes fixed on the unfolding process. "Based on the visible data streams, they appear to be conducting some form of accelerated genetic synthesis," Trudy replied. "The sequential patterns suggest." "Rafe, they're combining Varelian genetic material with what appears to be human DNA." "My DNA?" Rafe asked grimly. "The signature matches the access pattern detected earlier." "I believe so, yes." Rafe's jaw tightened. "So, someone's playing mad scientist with my genetic material without permission. That's a Class 1 diplomatic violation, not to mention personally invasive." "The process appears to be nearing completion," Trudy noted as the liquid in the tank began to drain slowly, revealing an obscured form within. Rafe strained to see what exactly was being created, but his view was partially blocked by equipment and the Varelian scientists themselves. "We need to get a better look. Is there another access point?" "Negative," Trudy responded. "However, I'm detecting communication signals. With your permission, I can attempt to intercept." "Do it," Rafe nodded. Trudy's surface rippled with complex patterns as she processed the alien communications. "Partial translation only," she warned. "But I'm detecting repeated references to hygieneticist protocols and optimal hybrid synthesis." "Hygieneticist?" Rafe frowned. "That's not a term I remember from the briefing materials." Cross-referencing with available historical data, Trudy hummed softly. Limited information suggests hygieneticist was a Varelian political faction that advocated for genetic purification several centuries ago. They were believed to have been disbanded following civil reforms. Looks like someone missed the memo, Rafe muttered. Suddenly, the laboratory illumination shifted to a brighter setting, and a liquid in the central tank drained completely. The three Varelian scientists gathered around, blocking Rafe's view momentarily. When he stepped aside, he had to stifle a gasp. Floating in the now-empty tank, connected to various monitoring devices, was what appeared to be a Varelian human hybrid, and one with a face disturbingly similar to Rafe's own, though with distinct Varelian features mixed in. The skin had a faint bluish tinge, the eyes were larger and had a silvery quality, but the facial structure was unmistakably modeled after Rafe himself. They've created some kind of clone, Rafe whispered, horrified and fascinated in equal measure. Not precisely a clone, Trudy corrected. Rather, a hybrid entity incorporating elements of your genetic structure with Varelian DNA. Essentially, a human Varelian hybrid with your physical characteristics. That's not at all comforting, Rafe replied. Why would they? A sudden alarm pulsed through the maintenance channel, cutting off his question. The blue-green illumination shifted to a warning red. We've been detected, Trudy announced, her voice modulating to urgency mode. Palace security protocols have identified unauthorized presence in the maintenance network. Time to make a strategic withdrawal, Rafe decided immediately, already backing away from the observation port. Which way? Our original route is likely monitored now, Trudy calculated rapidly. Alternate path available through the tertiary circulation system. Turn left at the next junction. They moved swiftly through the increasingly maze-like biological conduits, the alarm pulsing around them. Rafe could feel subtle vibrations in the walls and floor, as if the palace itself was reacting to their presence. The palace is reconfiguring to contain us, Trudy warned. Maintenance channels ahead are sealing. Options? Rafe asked, not slowing his pace. Emergency exit port 15 meters ahead on the right, Trudy directed. It will lead to the lower levels of the public areas, less secure than the royal sections. They reached the exit port just as the maintenance channel behind them began to contract, the living walls literally closing in. Rafe pressed through the narrow opening, finding himself tumbling rather unceremoniously into what appeared to be a storage area filled with dormant maintenance drones. Well, that was close, he muttered, brushing himself off as he got to his feet. Now what? Back to my quarters to pretend this never happened. Inadvisable, Trudy replied. Your room is likely being monitored, and your absence has almost certainly been noted. A noise at the entrance to the storage area caught Rafe's attention. He ducked behind a cluster of maintenance drones, gesturing for Trudy to dim her illumination. The door slid open to reveal Lady Serena, her expression stern as she scanned the darkened space. Commander Halden, she called out. I know you're here. The palace has tracked your movements. Rafe considered his options, then sighed and stepped out from his hiding place. Lady Serena, he greeted her with forced casualness. Lovely evening for a stroll through the palace innards, isn't it? Serena's silver eyes narrowed. You have accessed restricted areas without authorization, an act that could be construed as espionage. Funny thing about that, Rafe replied, crossing his arms. I was about to make a similar accusation. Someone in this palace accessed my genetic data without permission and is using it to create hybrid beings. That's a violation of about a dozen interstellar laws. A flicker of surprise crossed Serena's usually impassive face. You saw the laboratory. I saw enough, Rafe confirmed. Want to tell me what the hell is going on here? Because I'm pretty sure creating Rafe 2.0 wasn't part of the official diplomatic agenda. Serena hesitated, then glanced around as if checking for surveillance. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Not here. Follow me. And why exactly should I trust you? Rafe asked. Because I serve Princess Alessa, not the hygieneticists, Serena replied curtly. And because if I meant you harm, palace security would have already detained you. It wasn't the most reassuring answer, but Rafe had few alternatives. With a nod to Trudy, He followed Serena out of the storage area and into a series of less ornate corridors than those in the upper levels of the palace. The lower levels are less integrated with the royal neural network, Serena explained as they walked. It provides a measure of privacy from certain listeners. By which you mean whoever's running that secret lab? Rafe surmised. Precisely. Serena led them to a small chamber that appeared to be a private study or meeting room. Unlike most of the palace, this space contained actual furniture rather than grown structures, a sign that it predated the fully integrated biological architecture. Once inside, Serena sealed the door and activated what Rafe assumed was some kind of jamming device. "We can speak freely now," she said. "Great." Rafe crossed his arms. "Let's start with why someone's creating human Varillian hybrids using my DNA without so much as a pretty please. The situation is complicated," Serena began. "Isn't it always?" Rafe sighed. "Just give me the highlights version." "The hygieneticists were believed extinct as a political force," Serena explained. "But in reality, they went underground, continuing their work in secret. They believe Varillian genetic purity is threatened by interaction with other species, but rather than simple isolation, they seek to appropriate beneficial traits from other species while maintaining Varillian superiority. And let me guess, humans made their shopping list?" Rafe asked dryly. "Human adaptability and resilience are unmatched in the known galaxy," Serena acknowledged. "The hygieneticists see these as valuable traits to incorporate while eliminating what they perceive as human weaknesses." "Charming philosophy," Rafe muttered. "And the princess? Is she part of this little eugenics club?" "No." Serena's response was immediate and firm. "Princess Alessa has been fighting the hygieneticist influence since she took the throne. The official genetic concordance project she described to you is genuine, an effort to understand and preserve diverse genetic heritage across species. The hygieneticists have corrupted that mission for their own ends." "Then why invite me here at all?" Rafe demanded. If she knew there were rogue scientists lurking in the palace basement, why expose an Earth diplomat to that risk? Serena's expression became troubled. "Because we needed proof of their activities to present to the Council of Elders. Theoretical accusations would not be enough to move against such a deeply entrenched faction. We needed evidence. So I'm bait," Rafe concluded, a mixture of anger and grudging respect in his voice. "That's why she asked me to remove my armor. She, one of my genetic material, easily accessible." "Not precisely," Serena corrected. "The princess knew the hygieneticists would attempt to acquire your genetic material regardless of precautions. The removal of your armor was a test. A test of what? Your adaptability, your willingness to make yourself vulnerable. The princess needed to know if you were someone who could be trusted when the truth was revealed." Before Rafe could respond to this revelation, a muffled explosion shook the chamber, dust falling from the ceiling as the lights flickered. "What the?" Rafe began. "They're moving earlier than anticipated," Serena said grimly, already moving toward the door. "The hygieneticists must have realized their laboratory was compromised." "Moving on what?" Rafe asked, following her. "The throne itself," Serena replied, drawing what appeared to be a weapon from her biological armor, a device that seemed to grow directly from the material covering her forearm. "They've been planning a coup for years. Your discovery may have forced their hand." Another explosion rocked the structure, this one closer. The door to their sanctuary burst open, revealing a corridor filled with acrid smoke and the sounds of conflict. "Trudy," Rafe called to his AI companion. "Tactical assessment. Multiple energy discharges detected throughout the lower palace," Trudy reported. "Combat patterns suggest organized assault moving upward toward the royal chambers. Palace defensive systems are responding, but appear partially compromised. They've infected the palace neural network," Serena confirmed grimly. "We need to reach the princess." As they moved out into the corridor, a figure emerged from the smoke, a Varillian wearing combat armor with unfamiliar insignia. Before Rafe could react, Serena fired her weapon, sending a pulse of energy that dropped the attacker instantly. "Still think I should have kept my ceremonial armor?" Rafe asked as they pressed forward. It would have made you a more visible target, Serena replied without humor. This way, they navigated through increasingly chaotic scenes. Palace guards engaged in firefights with the insurgent hygieneticists, sections of the living architecture pulsing with distress as the integrated systems were attacked both physically and through what Rafe assumed was some form of cyber warfare targeted at the biological neural network. The royal chambers are 2 levels up, Serena informed him as they ducked into a maintenance lift. If the princess followed protocol, she will have relocated to the secure command center. And if she didn't, Rafe asked, then we face a significantly more complicated scenario, Serena admitted as the lift began its ascent. The doors opened onto a scene of devastation. What had been an elegant corridor was now scarred by weapons fire, with sections of the living walls darkened and unresponsive. Bodies, mostly Varelian, but with a few species Rafe didn't recognize, lay scattered among the debris. This is worse than I anticipated, Serena murmured, her typically composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. They must have had sleeper agents throughout the palace staff. They moved carefully toward the royal chambers, Serena leading with her weapon ready while Rafe stayed close behind, wishing fervently for some kind of armament beyond his wits. Trudy hovered near his shoulder, her sensors scanning constantly for threats. 3 hostiles approaching from the east corridor, she warned softly. Serena motioned for them to take cover behind a partially collapsed section of wall. Moments later, 3 armed Varelians moved into view, their biological armor modified with additional weapon systems that appeared grafted directly into their bodies. Enhanced combat units, Serena whispered. The hygieneticists' elite forces. Super soldiers, Rafe translated grimly. Any suggestions for handling them without, dying horribly? Their modifications make them formidable but arrogant, Serena replied. They rely too heavily on enhanced perception and not enough on basic tactical awareness. Meaning, they expect direct confrontation, Serena explained. Not misdirection. Rafe grinned suddenly. Now you're speaking my language. Trudy, think you can provide a distraction? Parameters? The AI inquired. Something loud, flashy, and preferably in the opposite direction from where we want to go. Trudy's surface rippled with what might have been the AI equivalent of enthusiasm. Calculating optimal distraction sequence. The sphere zoomed away from them, disappearing around a corner. Moments later, a cacophony of alarms and flashing lights erupted from a nearby junction, accompanied by what sounded like weapons discharge and shouted commands. The enhanced soldiers immediately moved toward the commotion, their modified forms moving with unnatural speed and precision. Now, Serena urged, and they dashed in the opposite direction toward a section of wall that appeared unremarkable until Serena pressed her palm against it. The living architecture recognized her biological signature and parted to reveal a hidden passage. Royal emergency protocols, she explained as they entered the concealed corridor. Only active for the princess and her most trusted advisors. The passage led them upward through the heart of the palace, bypassing the main routes that were likely overrun by hygieneticists' forces. After several minutes of climbing, they emerged into what appeared to be a command center. A circular chamber with biological interfaces and display surfaces showing various sections of the palace, many of which were now scenes of conflict. Princess Alessa stood at the center of the room, surrounded by a handful of loyal guards and advisors. Her biological armor had reconfigured into a more protective configuration, with sections that pulsed with energy that Rafe suspected was weaponized. She looked up as they entered, her silver eyes widening slightly at the sight of Rafe. "Commander, you survived. Don't sound so surprised, Your Highness," Rafe replied with a strained smile. "I'm notoriously hard to kill. Ask any of my previous commanding officers." "The hygieneticists have launched their coup," Serena reported formally. "They've compromised multiple systems and have deployed enhanced combat units throughout the upper levels. And the commander discovered their laboratory," Alessa noted, her gaze still fixed on Rafe. "You now understand why I requested your cooperation. You could have just told me," Rafe pointed out. Earth would have supported an investigation into illegal genetic experimentation. The high geneticists have agents in every major government, including your Earth Alliance, Alessa replied. Official channels were compromised. We needed to act quietly. Well, so much for the quiet approach, Rafe observed as another explosion shook the palace, causing several displays to flicker. What's the plan now? Before Alessa could respond, one of the biological interfaces pulsed urgently. A Varelian technician approached it, then turned to the princess with an expression of alarm. Your Highness, intruders have breached the secure perimeter. They will reach this location in approximately 3 minutes. Activate the final defensive protocols, Alessa commanded, and prepare for evacuation. The walls of the command center began to shift, hardening visibly as additional layers of protection formed from the living material. At the same time, a section of the floor reconfigured to reveal what appeared to be an escape route. Your Highness, one of the advisors spoke urgently. You must depart immediately. We will hold them here. Alessa hesitated, clearly torn between flight and remaining with her people. They're after you specifically, Serena reminded her. If you fall, Varelia falls. You know this. With visible reluctance, Alessa nodded. Commander Halden, you will accompany me. Your presence may be our best leverage should we encounter high geneticist forces. Happy to be of service, Rafe replied, making a mental note to discuss the concept of asking nicely with the princess if they survive this crisis. Trudy? Status? A soft chime indicated the AI's return, her spherical form hovering into the command center through one of the ventilation channels. Palace defenses are failing systematically, she reported. High geneticist forces have deployed some form of biological counteragent that is suppressing the palace's neural network. They're killing the palace itself, Alessa said, a note of genuine anguish in her voice that surprised Rafe. For the first time, he saw beyond her cold exterior to the ruler who genuinely cared for her people, and apparently for the living structure that housed them. Then we go, Rafe decided. Trudy, stick close. I have a feeling we're going to need your analytical capabilities before this is over. Alessa, Serena, Rafe, and 2 royal guards descended through the escape route, which turned out to be a vertical shaft with a gravity-dampening field that allowed them to glide downward rather than climb. They emerged in what appeared to be an ancient section of the palace, predating the fully integrated biological architecture, with actual stone and metal construction visible beneath later organic growth. The original royal sanctuary, Alessa explained briefly as they moved through dimly lit corridors. Built before the Great Synthesis, when Varelians still constructed rather than grew their dwellings. Less vulnerable to whatever they're using to attack the living sections, Rafe noted. Precisely, Serena confirmed, but also less connected to our modern systems. We will be operating with minimal technological support. They had just reached what appeared to be some kind of ancient meeting hall when Trudy emitted a warning tone. Multiple biological signatures. Approaching from the north corridor. Their pattern matches the enhanced combat units. The royal guards immediately took defensive positions, while Serena moved protectively in front of the princess. Trudy, any chance of another distraction? Rafe asked hopefully. Negative, the AI replied. This section lacks the integrated systems I previously manipulated. So we fight, Rafe concluded grimly, looking around for anything that might serve as a weapon. Alessa surprised him by extending her hand, her biological armor flowing and reshaping to produce what appeared to be a handheld energy weapon, which she offered to him. I believe you call this evening the odds, she said. Rafe accepted the weapon with a nod of thanks, testing its weight and grip. Nice. Does it come with an instruction manual? Point and discharge, Serena said flatly. Even a human should manage that. Your confidence is overwhelming, Rafe muttered, taking position behind a fallen column just as the first of the enhanced Varelian soldiers burst into the hall. The fight was brief but intense. The high geneticist forces possessed superior modifications, but Rafe and his unlikely allies had the advantage of defensible positions and the element of surprise. Rafe managed to take down 2 of the enhanced soldiers with well-placed shots, while Serena and the Royal Guards handled the others. As the last attacker fell, Rafe emerged from cover, only to freeze at the sound of slow, deliberate applause from the entrance to the hall. "Impressive adaptability," said a voice that sent chills down Rafe's spine, because it was his own voice, but with a Varelian harmonic undertone. Standing in the doorway was the hybrid clone he had seen in the laboratory. Rafe's face, but with Varelian features, clad in a form of biological armor that seemed more advanced than even the princess's. Subject 9, or, as I prefer, Rafe 3.2, the clone introduced himself with a smile that was disturbingly familiar. "A pleasure to meet my progenitor." Rafe kept his weapon trained on the newcomer. "Can't say the feeling's mutual. I tend to get cranky when people steal my DNA to make unauthorized copies." "Not a copy," 3.2 corrected smoothly. "An improvement. Your human resilience and adaptability, combined with Varelian biological integration capabilities. The best of both, with the weaknesses of neither. Yet you still inherited his unfortunate tendency toward excessive verbosity," Serena noted coldly, her own weapon fixed unwaveringly on 3.2. The hybrid chuckled, a sound so similar to Rafe's own laugh that it was deeply unsettling. "I came alone, as a gesture of good faith. I could have brought a squad of enhanced soldiers, but that would hardly facilitate the conversation we need to have. We have nothing to discuss with hygieneticist abominations," Alessa stated, her voice regal and unyielding. "Oh, but we do, Your Highness," 3.2 replied. "Because contrary to what you might believe, I am not here as your enemy." Rafe snorted skeptically. "Right. You're part of a coup against the legitimate government, created illegally in a secret lab, and you expect us to believe you're here to help. I was created by the hygieneticists, yes, 3.2 acknowledged, programmed for absolute loyalty to their cause. But something unexpected happened during my accelerated development." "What? You grew a conscience?" Rafe asked sarcastically. "In a manner of speaking," 3.2 replied, surprisingly serious. "I inherited not just your physical attributes, Commander, but elements of your psychological makeup as well, including your rather inconvenient moral compass and your tendency to question authority." Rafe blinked, momentarily thrown by this revelation. "You're saying you've gone rogue?" "I'm saying I recognize the flaws in hygieneticist ideology," 3.2 clarified. "They seek not harmony between species, but domination through selective absorption of traits they deem useful. It is a philosophy as self-defeating as it is morally bankrupt. And we should believe this convenient change of heart." "Why exactly?" Serena demanded. "Because right now, I'm your only hope of stopping what they've set in motion," 3.2 replied gravely. "The attack on the palace is merely a distraction. The true target is the planetary defense grid. Once compromised, it will be used to deploy a biogenetic agent into Verelia's atmosphere." "What kind of agent?" Alessa asked, her composure slipping slightly to reveal genuine alarm. "One designed to make conventional Verelians more receptive to genetic modification," 3.2 explained. "It won't kill, but it will weaken natural genetic resistance, making the population easier to improve according to hygieneticist standards." Rafe exchanged glances with Trudy, whose surface was displaying patterns of intense analytical activity. "Can you verify any of this?" he asked the AI. "The attack patterns do suggest a distributed approach consistent with a feint." "Operation," Trudy confirmed. "And I am detecting unusual activity in the upper atmosphere consistent with preparation for particle dispersal." "If he's telling the truth," Serena began, "we have less than an hour to prevent planetary exposure," 3.2 finished for her. "I have access codes and biometric clearances that can get us into the Defense Control Center. But I cannot do this alone." Rafe studied his clone's face, so similar to his own, yet fundamentally alien, trying to discern any sign of deception. It was like looking into a distorted mirror, familiar, yet wrong in subtle ways that his brain couldn't quite process. "For what it's worth," 3.2 added with a ghost of Rafe's own lopsided smile, I find their genetic purity obsession as absurd as you would. Diversity is strength. It's the one lesson from your memories that resonated most strongly. If you're lying, Alessa said after a tense moment of consideration, you doom not only yourself but the entire hygieneticist cause. You understand this. Perfectly, Your Highness. 3.2 replied with formal gravity. I expect no trust, only pragmatic cooperation in the face of a greater threat. Well then, Rafe sighed, lowering his weapon slightly. I guess I'm about to find out if working with myself is as annoying as it sounds. More so, 3.2 assured him with another unsettlingly familiar smile. I have all your irritating habits, but with enhanced cognitive processing. Wonderful, Rafe muttered. Trudy, admit my smarter, blue-skinned doppelganger to my list of unique diplomatic experiences. Noted, the AI replied. Though technically, the skin tone is closer to azure than blue, with undertones of, not the time, Trudy, Rafe cut her off. So, where's this defense control center, and what's our plan for stopping an airborne genetic apocalypse? With an uneasy alliance formed, the unlikely group, a human diplomat, an alien princess, her chief security advisor, and a human-alien hybrid clone, prepared to make their stand against the hygieneticist plot. As they followed 3.2 through ancient corridors toward a modern access point, Rafe couldn't help but wonder if Earth's diplomatic corps had any protocol for situations quite this bizarre. Then again, improvisation had always been his strong suit. Now he just had to hope it was a genetic trait his clone had fully inherited. True to his word, 3.2 led them through the ancient sections of the palace via routes that bypassed the main conflicts. Occasionally they encountered resistance, but the combination of Serena's tactical expertise, the Royal Guard's training, and the uncannily effective teamwork between Rafe and his clone made short work of any opposition. It's disturbing how well we anticipate each other's moves, Rafe commented after they'd efficiently neutralized a patrol of standard hygieneticist soldiers. Like fighting alongside a very weird mirror. I have your combat instincts, but enhanced reflexes, 3.2 explained. You anticipate my strategies because they're fundamentally yours, just executed with greater efficiency. And he says I have an ego problem, Rafe muttered to Trudy, who emitted a sound suspiciously like a digital snort. They reached a section where the ancient architecture began to blend with the modern biological systems, a transitional zone that 3.2 explained was less affected by the neural suppression agent the hygieneticists were using. The Defense Control Center is 2 levels above us, he informed them, approaching what appeared to be a dormant biological interface embedded in the wall. This terminal should still be functional. The interface remained dark when 3.2 placed his hand on it. The systems are more degraded than I anticipated, he frowned. We'll need a direct neural connection to reactivate this junction. Which means, Rafe prompted, I need to interface directly with the palace's biological systems, 3.2 explained. A full neural link, something only a hybrid physiology like mine can safely attempt with a network in this compromised state. Alessa stepped forward. As the royal architect, I should be the one to... With respect, Your Highness, 3.2 interrupted, your pure Varelian physiology would be vulnerable to the suppression agent. The human components in my neural structure provide a degree of resistance. He's right, Serena reluctantly confirmed. The risk to you would be unacceptable. 3.2 turned to Rafe with an oddly solemn expression. If I don't survive this, try not to waste the genetic material you've been blessed with. It's actually quite remarkable, even by Varelian standards. Was that a compliment from myself? Rafe asked, bemused. This day just keeps getting weirder. Without further comment, 3.2 pressed both hands against the interface. His biological armor reconfigured, extending tendrils that merged with the wall's organic material. His eyes closed, and a visible shudder ran through his body as the connection established. The dormant systems around them began to awaken, subtle illumination returning to the walls, interfaces flickering back to life. But 3.2's expression twisted into one of pain, blue-tinged sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled against something invisible. What's happening? Rafe demanded, looking to Alessa for explanation. He's fighting the suppression protocols, she replied, her silver eyes focused intently on the hybrid, attempting to create a clean pathway to the defense systems while keeping the hygieneticist corruption at bay. Is he winning? It's not a question of winning, Serena interjected. It's a question of how long he can maintain the connection before neural degradation begins. After several tense minutes, 3.2's eyes snapped open. I've established a secure route to the defense center, he gasped, his voice strained. But we must hurry. The pathway won't remain stable for long. The biological architecture around them reconfigured, revealing an access shaft that hadn't been visible before. Without hesitation, the group entered, finding themselves in a rapid transport system that propelled them upward through the palace structure. They emerged in a spherical chamber dominated by a central holographic display showing Virilia Prime and its orbital defense network. Several hygieneticist technicians were working at the controls, so focused on their tasks that they didn't immediately notice the new arrivals. That changed rapidly when Serena and the Royal Guards opened fire, dropping 2 of the technicians before they could respond. The others reached for weapons, but the combined efforts of Rafe, 3.2, and the princess's forces quickly overwhelmed them. Status of the defense grid? Alessa demanded as they secured the room. 3.2 moved to the central console, interfacing directly with the biological controls. They've already initiated the deployment sequence, he reported grimly. Atmospheric dispersal will begin in approximately 6 minutes. Can you stop it? Rafe asked, moving to stand beside his clone. Negative, 3.2 replied, frustration evident in his voice. They've locked out the abort protocols with a biological key that only the hygieneticist leader possesses. Then we find another way, Rafe insisted. There's always a backdoor, a workaround. That's the first rule of any security system. There is one possibility, 3.2 said hesitantly. The dispersal mechanism itself could be reconfigured. Instead of releasing the genetic modifier, it could deploy a neutralizing agent. Do we have such an agent available? Serena asked skeptically. 3.2's expression became complex, a mixture of determination and resignation that Rafe recognized all too well from his own mirror. We do, he said quietly. Me? Explain, Alessa commanded. My hybrid physiology contains naturally occurring antibodies against the hygieneticist agent, a side effect of combining human and Varelian DNA, 3.2 explained. If my genetic material is introduced into the dispersal mechanism, it will neutralize the agent's effects. But that would require, Serena began. Complete biological dissolution, yes, 3.2 confirmed. The process would be terminal for me. No, Rafe said immediately. There has to be another way. 3.2 turned to face his human progenitor, a sad smile playing on his familiar yet alien features. Would you sacrifice yourself to save an entire planet, Commander Halden? In a heartbeat, Rafe admitted without hesitation. Then allow me the same choice, 3.2 requested simply. After all, self-sacrifice for the greater good appears to be another trait I inherited from you. Although the hygieneticist would certainly consider it a design flaw rather than a feature. Before anyone could object further, a new alarm blared through the control center. The central display shifted to show a squad of enhanced hygieneticist soldiers fighting their way through the palace's upper levels, moving rapidly toward their position. We're out of time, Serena announced, checking the tactical display. They'll reach us in less than 3 minutes. Then my decision is made, 3.2 said firmly. Your Highness, I'll need your royal authorization to access the dispersal system. Alessa hesitated only briefly before placing her hand on a nearby interface, her biological armor connecting with the system. Granted. Proceed. Wait. Rafe moved closer to his clone, struggling with a bizarre situation. There has to be another option. Maybe if we work together. We are working together. 3.2 interrupted with a gentle smile. This is the culmination of everything you are, everything I inherited from you. The capacity to make the hard choice when it matters most. He turned to Trudy, who had been hovering silently nearby. AI unit, I've transmitted a secure data packet to your systems. It contains everything I've learned about the Hygieneticist network, their bases, their agents in various governments, their entire operation. Ensure it reaches the appropriate authorities. Confirmed, Trudy replied, her surface pulsing with the data transfer. Package secured. Rafe, 3.2 said, using his progenitor's first name for the first time, cover the entrance. Buy me the time, I need to complete the reconfiguration. With a grim nod, Rafe moved to a defensive position near the entrance, joined by Serena and the Royal Guards. They didn't have to wait long before the sounds of combat reached them. Energy weapons discharging, shouted commands, the heavy footfalls of enhanced soldiers. Behind them, 3.2 worked feverishly at the console, his biological armor extending more tendrils into the system as he fought to override the hygieneticist protocols. His form began to glow with an internal blue light as his hybrid physiology prepared for the ultimate sacrifice. The first of the enhanced soldiers burst through the entrance, immediately met with concentrated fire from Rafe and the defenders. Despite superior numbers, the narrow access point forced the attackers to come through in limited numbers, allowing the defenders to hold them back, if only temporarily. Status. Rafe called out between exchanges of fire. Reconfiguration at 60%, 3.2 reported, his voice strained. The system is fighting me, but I'm making progress. A particularly powerful blast knocked one of the Royal Guards backward, leaving a gap in their defensive line. Rafe rolled into position, continuing to fire even as enemy weapons scorched the material beside his head. 70%, 3.2 called out. Initiating genetic transfer sequence. The blue glow surrounding him intensified, and Rafe risked a glance back to see his clone beginning to physically change, his biological armor merging more completely with his body as the dispersal system began to extract the necessary genetic material. 90%, 3.2 gasped, obvious pain in his voice now. Just a little longer. The defense line was faltering. One of the Royal Guards fell, and Serena took a glancing hit to her shoulder that didn't stop her ruthless efficiency, but clearly caused her pain. Rafe felt his energy weapon growing dangerously hot from continuous use, its charge depleting rapidly. Complete. 3.2 announced suddenly. Dispersal reconfigured. Initiating countermeasure deployment in 5, 4. The chamber was suddenly bathed in blinding light as the central console activated fully, channeling energy through 3.2's form. For a moment, Rafe could see the outline of his clone, back arched in pain, yet arms spread wide in what looked almost like embrace, before the light became too intense to look at directly. When it faded seconds later, 3.2 was gone. In his place was only a residual shimmer in the air and a faint blue luminescence that slowly dissipated. On the central display, the planetary view showed a wave of energy spreading through Virelia's atmosphere. Not the sickly green of the hygieneticist agent, but a clean blue pulse that neutralized it wherever they met. The attacking soldiers faltered, seemingly receiving new information through whatever command system they used. Their coordinated assault broke down into confusion, giving Rafe and the defenders the opening they needed to press their advantage. Within minutes, the remaining hygieneticist forces had either been neutralized or retreated. The defense control center was secure, and the planetary dispersal system showed complete neutralization of the genetic modifier agent. Rafe stood in stunned silence, staring at the spot where his clone had been. The concept of watching yourself die, even a version of yourself that had only existed for days, was profoundly disorienting. He saved everyone, Alessa said softly, coming to stand beside Rafe. For the first time since he'd met her, her royal composure seemed slightly cracked, revealing genuine emotion beneath. Yeah, Rafe nodded, still processing. Turns out I'm a pretty decent guy in any species. The Palace neural network is already beginning to recover, Serena reported, examining a nearby console. The suppression agent is breaking down. We're receiving reports from across the capital, Hygieneticist forces are in retreat or surrendering. And the data 3.2 provided? Alessa asked, turning to Trudy. Comprehensive, the AI confirmed. Detailed information on hygieneticist operations across 3 sectors, including their agents within various governments, including, I regret to inform you, Commander within Earth Alliance Command. Great, Rafe sighed. That'll make for a fun debriefing when I get home. How was your diplomatic mission, Rafe? Oh, the usual, uncovered a conspiracy, met my alien clone, watched him sacrifice himself to save a planet. Tuesday stuff. Despite everything, Alessa's lips curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Your humor remains intact, even in crisis, Commander. An admirable human trait. Speaking of human traits, Rafe said, suddenly serious. We need to talk about this whole genetic research situation. Earth won't take kindly to unauthorized experimentation, even if it did inadvertently save the day this time. Agreed, Alessa nodded. The legitimate genetic concordance project will continue, but with full transparency and proper protocols. No more secrets. That is my royal pledge to you and to Earth. I'll hold you to that, Your Highness, Rafe replied. In the days that followed, the palace was gradually restored to its former glory as the living architecture healed itself. The hygieneticist conspiracy was systematically dismantled, with agents arrested across Virilia and information shared with affected governments throughout the sector. Rafe spent much of this time working with Alessa and her council, helping draft a new interspecies genetic research treaty that would allow beneficial study while preventing the kind of abuses the hygieneticist had perpetrated. Throughout these meetings, he noticed a subtle but definite change in the princess's demeanor toward him. A new respect, perhaps even warmth, that hadn't been there before. A week after the failed coup, Rafe found himself invited to a private audience with Alessa in the palace gardens, a breathtaking space where the living architecture reached its most spectacular expression, with flowering structures that changed colors with the movement of Aurelia's twin suns. Alessa was waiting for him beside a pool of luminescent liquid that reflected the evening sky in rippling patterns. Her biological armor had returned to its more ceremonial configuration, though Rafe noticed it still maintained combat readiness beneath its decorative elements. A lesson learned, perhaps. Commander Halden, she greeted him formally. Your Highness, he replied with a small bow that was now more habit than protocol. Beautiful evening. Indeed. She gestured for him to join her on a living bench that grew from the garden floor. The treaty draft has been transmitted to Earth. Your diplomat's initial response is cautiously optimistic. High praise from Earth's diplomatic corps. Rafe chuckled. They're not known for enthusiastic endorsements. Much like yourself, Alessa observed. They seem to prefer understatement. Speaking of understatement, Rafe said, I'm scheduled to return to Earth tomorrow. Any chance you might tell me why you really asked me to remove my armor that first day? Serena mentioned something about a test, but I still feel like I'm missing part of the puzzle. Alessa was silent for a moment, her silver eyes reflecting the garden's bioluminescence. Virilians believe that true understanding can only be achieved without barriers, she finally said. But for us, armor is not merely physical protection. It is an extension of ourselves, a part of our biology. And for humans, it's just fancy metal plates, Rafe nodded. I get the cultural difference, but that doesn't explain why you single me out for the strip show. I needed to see, Alessa continued, ignoring his attempt at humor, if you were capable of making yourself vulnerable. If you could set aside not just physical protection, but the emotional armor humans so often hide behind. My winning personality, you mean? Rafe asked with a raised eyebrow. Your humor, Alessa clarified. Your constant deflection through jokes and quips. I needed to know if there was substance beneath the performance. And the dramatic request in front of your entire court was the best way to find out. Rafe asked skeptically. It was efficient, Alessa replied with what might have been a hint of defensiveness. Virilians value directness. Well, I hope I passed your little test, Rafe said. You did, Alessa confirmed, though in ways I had not anticipated. Your willingness to remove your armor was only the beginning. Your actions throughout this crisis, Your adaptability, your courage, your willingness to trust even my clone when necessary, revealed more about humanity than any genetic sample could have. Glad to be a good ambassador for the species, Rafe said, strangely touched by her assessment. Alessa reached out, her long fingers hovering just above his arm without quite touching, a gesture of intimacy by Varelian standards. In the spirit of continued transparency between our peoples, I have a proposition for you, Commander. I'm listening, Rafe said cautiously. Remain on Varelia, Alessa said simply, not as Earth's representative, but as my advisor on interspecies relations. Your unique perspective would be valuable to me. Rafe blinked in surprise. You're offering me a job? I am offering you a position of significant influence in the royal court, Alessa corrected, and the opportunity to continue the work we have begun, ensuring that genetic research benefits all species without exploitation or abuse. That's quite an offer, Rafe said genuinely. Taken aback. What about Earth Command? I do still technically work for them. A diplomatic reassignment can be arranged, Alessa replied with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way. I have already discussed the possibility with your superiors. You've been planning this, Rafe realized. For how long? Since you survived your unauthorized exploration of the maintenance tunnels, Alessa admitted. Few would have shown such initiative or such skill in evading palace security. So my breaking and entering impressed you? Rafe laughed. Back on Earth, that usually gets you arrested, not job offers. Varelia values adaptability, Alessa said simply. It is a trait we share with humans, though we express it differently. Rafe considered the offer, surprised by how tempting it was. Earth Command had always been a somewhat uncomfortable fit for his unorthodox approach. And there was something about Varelia, about its living architecture, its complex society, and yes, even its enigmatic princess, that intrigued him deeply. I need certain conditions, he said finally. Regular communication with Earth. Complete access to all genetic research data. And Trudy stays with me, obviously. Acceptable terms, Alessa nodded. Is that a yes, Commander? It's a let's try it and see, Rafe clarified with a smile. Adaptability works both ways, Your Highness. You might find having a human advisor more challenging than you anticipate. I count on it, Alessa replied, and Rafe was startled to see a genuine smile transform her features, subtle by human standards, but remarkable for a Varelian known for her cold demeanor. Our differences are our strength, as recent events have proven rather definitively. As the twin suns of Varelia set beyond the palace's living spires, casting the garden in a warm golden glow, Rafe found himself contemplating the strange twist his diplomatic mission had taken. He had arrived expecting formal negotiations and political maneuvering. Instead, he had found conspiracy, combat, and an unexpected clone. He had witnessed the near fall of a civilization and helped to save it. And now, it seemed, he would be staying, continuing to build bridges between human and Varelian understanding in ways neither Earth Command nor Princess Alessa could have foreseen. By the way, he said casually as they rose to return to the palace, now that I'm going to be sticking around, any chance I could get my armor back? It may not be biologically integrated or anything fancy, but I was kind of attached to it. It has been preserved, Alessa assured him, though I would suggest you continue without it for official court functions. It sets a noteworthy precedent. The armorless advisor, Rafe mused, has a certain ring to it. Indeed, Alessa agreed, that hint of a smile returning. Though you may find, Commander, that in removing one type of armor, you acquire another, one far more valuable. More Varelian wisdom? Rafe asked. Simple truth, Alessa replied. Sometimes protection comes not from what we wear, but from who stands beside us. As they re-entered the palace, the living walls pulsing with renewed vitality after their brush with destruction, Rafe realized that the princess was right. He had arrived on Varelia armored in metal and protocol, wary of alien intentions. He would stay armored instead in newfound trust and unlikely alliances, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The princess had told the human soldier to take off his armor, and what she'd found underneath had surprised them both. Not weakness or vulnerability, but the strength that comes from genuine connection. It was, Rafe decided, a diplomatic outcome that no briefing could have prepared him for, and one that just might change the course of human-Varillian relations forever. "So," he said as they reached the grand corridor leading back to the royal chambers, "does this mean I get upgraded quarters? Because if I'm staying long-term, I'd really appreciate a bed that doesn't analyze my sleep patterns and adjust itself every time I roll over. A man needs some mystery in his life." Alessa's expression didn't change, but Rafe could have sworn he heard something suspiciously like a suppressed laugh in her voice when she replied, "I will take your request under advisement, Commander. Varillians may value transparency, but even we understand the importance of personal space." "Progress already?" Rafe grinned. "I think this arrangement is going to work out just fine." And as the living palace hummed with renewed life around them, the unlikely pair, human soldier and alien princess, continued their walk in companionable silence, neither fully aware of just how significant their unconventional alliance would prove to be in the years to come. Somewhere, in whatever form consciousness persisted after biological dissolution, Rafe 3.2 might have been watching with satisfaction. The hybrid being had sacrificed himself to save a planet, but in doing so, had helped forge a connection between two worlds that no laboratory could have engineered. It was by any measure a legacy worth having, regardless of how few days he had existed to create it. The genetic code of adaptability, it seemed, expressed itself in ways even the most brilliant scientists could never predict. And perhaps that unpredictability, that capacity for surprise and growth and change, was the greatest strength any species could possess. It certainly made for a more interesting universe. And if there was one thing Rafe Halden appreciated in any version of himself, it was an interesting universe. The end.